All right, jump right to the work items. So reviewing goals from last week. So audit log. I don't know who wrote this. Was this Andreas?
Yeah. So I wanted to group it by topic. So this is audit log. One goal was to talk about the design for it. There is no specific proposal yet because on Thursday after settling on date partitioning, we ran into a conversation where that was identified as a local optimization, and we might want to think about namespace-based shard or partitioning approaches. That's the current state of that.
Yep. Yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit more in the sharding working group today. And then, all right, notes about testing in production. That's in the sharding working group as well. Thanks for creating that issue. And migration strategies. I think this was Pat, right?
Yeah, that's me.
Okay. Hey, Josh. Hey, Josh.
Hello.
Well, maybe we can go back to testing data in production. Do you have any thoughts or opinions on this one, Josh? Using production data to test. So specifically, I guess the most specific example we can use right now is testing our partitioning strategy on audit events. So
and this is in production, not using Postgres AI?
No, it would be using a copy of production data. And there's more details in the issue about how right now there are ways that we can make a manual copy and make sure that it's locked down so there's no other access to it.
Okay. So the question is, can we copy the database in some way, shape, or form? And mostly from a privacy PII, like data concern, security. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, we're not actually looking at anything more than we can look at in production now, right? Because most of the folks on this team have access to the production data anyway. We're not elevating access. It's just to test the performance of these changes.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing to ask. Can we ping? I'm not sure. Jonathan Hunt would be one person, but he's like the VP of security. I think you want to try and ask corporate security. I'm not sure, for example, what, if any, audit requirements we have on the GitLab.com data, right? Like if you access things or pull data on .com, you probably leave an audit trail. Whereas with this other thing, you might not. That would be like the one area of concern that I might think of. And with our SOC 2 and other compliance standards, we might have to meet some of these requirements now of having an audit trail on some data access. I'll comment on the issue, but that'd be where I think where we can probably start with first and asking. It's probably a good thing to ask.
Okay.
Since it would not be through like an already established services and approved like Postgres AI, I think, right? So it'd be like a sort of a bit of a snowflake.
It's nothing new because we already have the process in there for making copies, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, Andreas. We're not inventing anything new for testing or copying data. It's just something we've always been able to do before.
Yeah, we've done this for a while, but from the infrastructure side, where we have access to data anyways, and this sort of dripped over into development now. So basically, we're asking as a development team, can we use that data for database side testing? And I think the process exists, and we might want to adjust that a little bit for our team. And the access method is pretty much the same as we already have for production data. So we would have a pSQL session, pSQL console, and we already have that for production. And I don't think there's any auditing on that going on.
Gotcha. Okay. Let me ask, and we can try and get an answer here. And to be clear, this would be I think the first major question is no one will have access to this who doesn't already have access to GitLab.com. Okay.
Right. There's no elevation of privileges.
All right.
Okay. And then what else did we have for goals for the week? Partitioning. Giannis, were you able to sync up with Andreas, figure out where to help on partitioning?
No, we didn't have the time, but I want to sync up with him because this is major part for benchmarking also and other things that we have to discuss. So yeah, I will ask Andreas if we can do it tomorrow.
Sure.
Migrations, yeah, we talked about migration, partitioning design. So yeah, we got the 2 topics on the table for partitioning audit logs, whether it's created at or a top level namespace, and maybe that's something we can talk about next since Josh is on here. And then implementing the cascading deletes without foreign key. Did that close out?
The second part got merged. The third part still needs to be merged.
Okay. Right. Did we ever answer your question? Oh, on the Patroni using so much storage, that was replicas, right?
Yeah, Patroni is the actual Postgres cluster.
That's right. Okay. So, yeah, it is the start of 13.1 milestone. Andreas rightfully asked, what are we committing to? What's the goal for the milestone? And I actually added a comment in there. So partitioning, there's a lot of eyes on it right now. So partitioning is far and away our top priority, and having a couple of you pair up on it. So like, everybody focus where they can on this. And we can get into specifics here in a sec. Database growth and size has popped up again. Josh, you called that one out. I'm not gonna be able to see my screen. Is there a specific issue on this one since it was a Slack?
There is it's a running question in the Goldman Sachs. I don't think this is public, right? Goldman Sachs issue tracker. So basically, I'm not sure the exact details. I was flipping through the Goldman Sachs Slack channel and I saw some of their alerts. And so basically it sounds like they're deleting the pipelines to try and save database space. I'm not sure exactly why or what constraints they have in the database size, but they weren't a fan of it. So I just want to highlight that they're having problems with database size. So that seems like a real problem for our users, and B, this seems like it might be helpful for them because they can simply just run a new pipeline if you need to, right? As opposed to hitting retry if you need to recreate something. I think that was a major concern with just deleting stuff, is that they might not be able to recreate certain environments anymore if they can't run the pipelines. I think it should be deterministic, hopefully.
Is there anything specifically we should look into?
No, I think this is underway. I just want to highlight that that in general, database size, at least from one customer, is they're having problems with it. I would like to learn more about that. I have made comments about some of the data retention and archival benefits we can get by cleaning up data from the database. And I've gotten some comments that it doesn't matter once we have sharding, because we'll just we'll pay a constant time cost to fan out across the partitions, and therefore, it doesn't really matter anymore because we're not going to do some table scans. But so I think understanding more of the challenges our customers are having, and building a case around why database size is important might be valuable, so we can better address some what will partitioning solve and what partitioning won't solve, and what we'll have to make sure we tackle other projects to ensure we have a performance and scalable database. And so that's all I think. So take homes here is I'll try and get more detail with the customer issue so they have an understanding of what they're experiencing and why, and sort of what, maybe have an idea of how common this is across customers. And I think internally, we probably need to think about how to better segment what problems Starting will address and which ones it won't address, and for problems it won't address, what we need to do to try and tackle those. If that makes sense.
So yeah, since we talked about a customer, I'll make sure this is marked as private. It makes me kind of cringe, and I saw at least one or two faces kind of react to your comment about it doesn't matter, sharding will take care of this problem. We're still a ways away from a production level sharding rollout, and I think there are probably still some things that we should fix in our database growth and current size, and we fortunately have epics for both of those. And to Andreas' question, what should we prioritize for 13.1? We have a couple individual issues in there. And we know we need to focus on partitioning. We don't know specifically what would have the most impact on the database growth and overall size. So maybe we can spend the next several minutes talking about that. And to the partitioning side, so right now we're approaching audit events on the created by, so partitioning on a date range. But the question that Sid brought up last week was, why aren't we focusing on namespace? And Andreas, you want to bring up the product concerns on that one so we can get some early feedback from Josh here before we go over to the sharding working group later? Maybe that'll help us focus what we want to do on 13.1.
Mm-hmm. So maybe just as a quick recap of why we chose time as a partitioning key for audit log. With the existing features, that is sort of ideal, because if we can assume that we always have a date filter, then the date based partitioning, that's kind of ideal. It goes with everything. It works for the admin view, which is instance wide, and it also works for the project views and the API. It's all good, as long as we always have this date filter in place. Now, I think the argument that was made was assuming that in the broader sense, we want to go after namespace-based sharding, and that in that sense, you can think that a date-based partitioning scheme is a local optimization, right? It optimizes for that problem, but nothing more. Now, if we wanted to explore the global problem more and go after namespace sharding, that I think that raises product side concerns even with the audit log feature. An example for that is there's two ways to access that data. One is on the project level. That's all fine. That's inside a namespace. It goes well with the sharding idea by namespace. The other one is on the instance level, which is instance wide. Gives the admin a way to look into the audit log, and that doesn't play nicely with the namespace-based sharding idea. So if we want to explore that more, there are certainly product questions that are going to come up, because those features that don't go well with the namespace-based sharding, they are either going to break if we keep it the same way, or become much more expensive because we have to change them so that they still work in the namespace-based sharding world. I think this is very valuable to explore, even for the audit log, because those things are likely to happen much more across the application if we go down the namespace-based sharding approach, right? We have other examples where user dashboard is in conflict with that idea and much more. I wonder how we organize that product conversation, or what your thoughts are on that, Josh?
Yeah, I think we need to have this discussion for workflows that are instance-wide, which, as you note, like some of the dashboards, some of the project search workflows, things like that. Audit logs is another one that's instance-wide, right? If you're an admin of theguy.com, you're going to want to have some kind of instance-wide access. So that is important. I think a question would be, can we partition on two things? Like, is that an option? Can we have a one on, like, I'm not sure how that would work with sharding, because you're going to shard on one thing, right? And you can't really partition on two things either. I don't know. But anyways, I'd be curious. I think one of the reasons I wasn't part of the previous conversation, but on the namespace is that it provides potentially some isolation if someone's abusing a service, then the database should be relatively not impacted for people outside of that particular namespace. And secondarily, it could potentially have some help on data residency. Unclear what that would be, but if you wanted to have potentially a database somewhere with your projects that have to live in Europe, that could be helpful. So I think that's part of what Sid's driving at as far as my previous context. So those are probably some pretty good benefits to have. So I opened up an issue to explore that partitioning key in this release. I'm not sure I have any insights right now. The two competing things, right? One is the per workflow, what's the best partition key for that workflow, and the other one is sort of these high level goals of isolation and potentially data residency. Part of it might be exploring, do we actually get data residency benefits or not? Is isolation actually going to be beneficial, or is the initial manager layer, coordinator layer still going to go down and have and be impacted? And then on the audit events, if we do go with namespace ID, what are our options to try to continue to scale this and other similar types of workflows? Because isolation is a thing, and we're probably not going to figure out all the limits or implement all the limits that people can potentially abuse soon, right? And so if you're a major enterprise customer of GitLab, that will be a significant risk to you until we can do a better job of trying to isolate some of these customers. So I don't know, I'm a bit rambling there, but some thoughts. I think we need a little more diligence on have better data on both these things.
What I'm not clear about at the moment is if we actually want to go in the direction where we sort of isolate users to a namespace, and we confine them into a namespace. That sort of has come up as the reason why namespace based sharding works, right? Because everything is inside a namespace, but the reality is that users are not. And I wonder, do you know if there's any efforts going in that direction or exploring that idea of confining users in the namespace?
Yeah, so we have the idea of the managed team that's working on this, the concept of spaces. It's basically like, also another word from it's like group managed accounts, where your account is tied to the company. The reason that is happening is because of a number of corporate data controls that need to be implemented. For example, one event that really did happen is that someone forked a company private project into personal namespace. And once that happens, that company loses all rights over the personal namespace. They can't do anything. And this person accidentally set it to have a wider visibility setting. It wasn't intentionally trying to leak content, but they set it that way. And effectively, the only recourse, aside from having, calling that person and saying, hey, you have to fix this, is to file a DMCA takedown request with GitLab Legal, because they had no other admin controls over that project. And that takes days to work its way through the process. So that has to get fixed, and we have to have better controls for companies on their own corporate data. So the concept of spaces and group managed accounts is being built for more isolation between tenants on GitLab.com.
So, sorry, can you link to the issue that you created on that, Josh?
Yeah.
I have some concerns, but they're probably conversations we should have later. And if we need to, if everybody wants to get back together and talk more about 13.1 after sharding working group, I'm up for it. I'm open that half hour after sharding working group. But so need to kind of narrow the scope of the meeting so that we're focusing on this milestone. So for this milestone, we're partitioning for what we know. Does it make sense for us to continue to focus on the date partitioning, or should we switch focus on audit events on the namespace partitioning, or should we do both?
I think we're trying to evaluate the key right now. So to the degree that we can, maybe run some of these partitioning tests and estimate what growth would look like, I think that would be good, right? If we can say, look, without partitioning audited events on timestamps, we're going to run into major problems here, or something like that. I think that would be helpful, right? To counterbalance some of the, I would say, strategic benefits we might get with sharding a namespace around isolation and potential data residency. Like, I think there's two competing concerns. One is, does the audit events workflow, can that continue to scale given the access patterns of that workflow, versus we want to have isolation and potential data residency, and namespace isolation, namespace partitioning could get us there. So they're like, one's a global thing and one's a local optimization. But if audit events is going to fall over without timestamp partitioning, that would be good to know. Because then
it already does. I think we already know it does already fall over on GitLab.com at least. So some parts, they just time out or have like horrible user experience at the moment.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think the difference here is if we move forward with partitioning on timestamp, we pretty sure we'll get some performance improvements on what we know today, and it's something that's actionable right now, right? Whereas with the namespace partitioning on audit events, we know we're going to break some things based on current functionality. It's still
fine. Break some things. Like, are we going to break some things by virtue of implementing the namespace partitioning, or is we're not going to solve the actual problems of the audit events table by partitioning a namespace?
It could be both. So by breaking, I mean, just functionally, it's probably not going to return in a time frame that either the user wants, or it's just going to time out, right? If they are, Andreas can probably answer this better. Access patterns, if they're in their own namespace when they're looking at audit events, maybe it'll work if it's scoped down, or it might require some product changes. I can't remember what Andreas told me like 20 minutes ago.
No, it's exactly like that. We would optimize for the by namespace case, and that might mean that for example, the admin UI, I would guess that's likely to break on GitLab.com as it looks now. But I really don't know if that's working at the moment at all. Like, it could also be broken and nobody knows. Or are we even using that? Is it important to support that for GitLab.com? That's maybe another question.
Yeah. I don't know what the audit events for GitLab comments. It may be irrelevant given we have Kibana and other tools that we utilize instead of that. So it might be that no one actually goes there and looks at it at the instance level. It's probably a question we should ask the infrastructure team or the security team, whoever might use that thing. My guess is, in general, you would like people to operate GitLab as their customers would operate it. And so providing in-app tools to do security investigations and things like that is probably good. That way you don't have to rely on other tools. But it's probably a question we should dig into in the issue. Maybe this partitioning key one as we're exploring like the challenges. But it sounds like either way, if we're going to partition on namespace, we need to figure out what the path forward is in audit events. And to your point, maybe it's irrelevant on the instance level workflows. But even on a namespace, is it still scalable? I don't know. For some of our larger enterprise customers, like if you had 50,000 users, would you be okay on a single table, or would you still need to partition it? So I think those are questions we need to sort of just answer and have good solid data on.
Let me ask a different way. Is anybody waiting for decisions on whether we change to top level namespace on partitioning audit events versus sticking with the created at partitioning?
Yep.
You're blocked. Okay. And that might get, yeah, we can, all right. We got the next half hour to talk about it in working group. And like I said, I'm free after that if we want to continue this conversation, because we are down to 5 minutes for this meeting. We haven't answered the questions yet. And I have some big concerns about what Josh said about isolation residency. That seems to further complicate partitioning strategies, but we can leave that for a later conversation. So again, to recap on, if we partition on created at, it's not going to break anything, and we feel like it's going to benefit the application immediately. With partitioning on namespace on audit events, we do feel like it's going to break and probably require product changes. Is that a good enough high-level summary?
But it might help to inform future conversations better how to approach these things.
Yeah, especially when we try and transition that into other areas of the database where we want to partition that top-level namespace. Right?
Right.
So I guess that's a product question, right? Do we want the immediate performance improvements on audit, or do we want to focus on the long-term goals of this sharding implementation?
Well, I think if it's a difficult two-way door, right? If we go down and partition on audit events, if we do end up partitioning on namespace, what does that mean? Do we have to essentially drop table? Like I don't know what happened there. I think that would be interesting to know more on. If it's a one-way door to some degree, it's probably not a one-way door, but how much heavy lifting would it be to switch over?
Okay. Does everybody want to talk after the sharding working group?
We have the kickoff, so I have to join the kickoff.
Yeah.
But,
Andreas, is that
that.
too late for you, or are you free?
I can do half an hour.
Okay.
That works.
I will set up a meeting then so we can continue, because we still need to look at 13.0, see what's still in there. Maybe folks can move them in that half an hour if you're not in the meeting, and we'll have some more information from the sharding working group. So, all right, I'll log off and jump over to the other meeting. Thanks, everybody.
Right. Thanks.